Does your vote matter? And ultimately, does it impact your favorite NFL team's win percentage over the next 4 years? That is the question we are going to attempt to answer today, especially with the presidential election for 2024 looming. It is just in a matter of days. And this is nothing more than entertainment and fun, guys. I had a curiosity that I wanted to solve, an itch to scratch. And it kind of took me back to the days of elementary and middle school where you had to do science fair on the trifold boards and you pick something that you hypothesized about and then you experimented with and you changed some variables and then you presented it one day to a bunch of strangers who were the judges and you were so nervous and the gymnasium was full of these trifold boards and you couldn't play kickball that week because you had to set up for the science fair. I hated it. I hated science fair, but this was rather fun for me. And maybe it's because there's no pressure. So that's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to talk about if your vote matters, and we're going to look at the data from 2020. So here is a map of the states that do not have an NFL team. There are 27 of them. And of the 27 states, 17 voted red or voted for Trump, and 10 voted blue or voted for Biden. And what I find interesting about this is this massive mass of land in the middle of the United States that has no NFL teams. I find it quite bizarre, actually, when you look at this from a holistic perspective of the 50 states, right? These are the teams, or rather the states, that do have NFL teams. And these states voted blue, 20-12. There are 32 teams, and so you see the breakdown there. The thing I should let you know, or kind of warn you about, which may be obvious, is this data is obviously skewed after the fact because we know Biden won, right? Like if Trump won 2020, this map would probably look a little different. The numbers would be different, right? So you have to kind of understand the data, it is based on the fact that Biden won, okay? So just keep that in mind as we move through this. If we went back and looked at 2016 when Trump won, obviously the states would be different colors, okay? So now what? What did I do with this information? How did I actually test if the states' votes impacted the NFL teams? Well, I went through and I wrote down the percentage of red and blue votes per state. So here you see Alabama. Alabama doesn't have an NFL team. They were 62% Trump, 36% Biden. So what I would do in this column, as you can see, it's not pictured because these are only the states with NFL teams, is I would write in there 62% red, 36% blue. Then what I did was I went through each of the teams and I wrote how many wins they have combined in the last 4 years, or since the new president was in office. All right. So what did I do with that information? This is the chart that you need to understand fully if you're going to understand how the data is presented in the next few slides. So I made this axis. On the y-axis, so up and down, are wins from the last 4 years. 34 wins is exactly the midpoint. If a team won 34 games, they won exactly half of their games in the last 4 years. So the higher up a team is placed on the chart, the better that team has been over the last 4 years, and the lower a team is, the worse. Now, obviously, left to right, I tried to make very easy for you. The more left a team is, the more liberal their state voted. The more right a state is, the more conservative their state voted. So you will see, for example, Washington Commanders. I charted them in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was like 90% for Joe Biden. So they're going to be way over here on the more liberal side, okay? So step one, we're going to chart the AFC. We're going to chart half the teams, and here we go. Ta-da! All right. And how you kind of analyze this, there's a couple different ways. But I just want to leave it on the screen. You guys can take a look at it. I tried to give you guys some synopses in the corners. So blue teams or states that went for Biden that ended up having a good record or a winning record in the 4 years to follow, there were 3 of them in the AFC: the Bills, the Ravens, and the Steelers. As for teams that went for Trump that ended up being good for the next 4 years, we have the Chiefs, the best team in the NFL over the last 4 years, the Dolphins, the Browns, the Bengals, and the Titans, surprisingly. I was kind of shocked the Titans have had a winning record the last 4 years based on how they've played this year. And As for the bad teams, we have 5: the Chargers, the Patriots, the Broncos, the Jets, and the Raiders. And for red, or teams that voted or states that voted for Trump that were bad, we have the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Houston Texans. Okay, so the very irrelevant conclusion that we can maybe draw, and one that I don't think is actually factual or can be relied on, is that states that went for Trump in 2020 in the AFC ended up having better luck than teams that did not. Now, do I think, and I know this for fun, but I need to be serious, do I actually think that there is a correlation with how a state votes and how the NFL teams perform? No! What? Are you crazy? Of course not. I think it's about if they've turned their back on God. Just kidding. But that's actually, funny enough, that's actually what started this whole conversation. Was my friend messaged me and he said, why are the 49ers so bad? I said, well, they're in California. They've turned their back on the Lord. And that's what happens when you do. I was being ironic. I was being satirical, right? And he said, I wonder if there's an actual correlation in how religious a state is and how their football teams perform. And I thought, I don't know how to test that, but what I can test is how they vote, because that data is out there, and sometimes voting and religion do align. So that's how we got to this whole presentation, if you want to know the backstory. Let's look at the NFC, because it's slightly different. And one thing you'll notice about the NFC is how closely their states voted to kind of evenness, or 50%. A lot of states on this middle line, which means a majority of NFC-based teams had states between 53% either way. Very close presidential election we saw in 2020. I'd imagine that we see the same thing yet again. Okay, so blue, good teams in the NFC that voted for Biden, there were 6, all right? The Niners, the Rams, the Seahawks, basically the NFC West, the Packers, the Eagles, and the Vikings. Now, red teams, or teams that voted for Trump that were good, Saints, Buccaneers, and Dallas Cowboys. But again, nothing overwhelming in terms of allegiance to a candidate, except maybe Louisiana, which was pretty heavily for Trump, and then these 2 California teams, which we all come to expect by now. Now, the more liberal teams or votes for bad teams, you can see down here, we have the Lions, the Cardinals, the Giants, the Bears, and Washington Commanders way over here, like 90%, guys. Like Washington, D.C. is as blue gets, and that's where I've chosen to plot. I mean, there's debates on where you want to house the Commanders. I chose D.C., okay? And only one, and surprisingly, Georgia was blue in the election. Very, very, very minuscule favor of Biden in 2020. For red teams that were bad, only the Carolina Panthers, only team that was bad from 2020. So if you want to look at the whole entire chart and kind of map it out, this is what we see in 2020. We have 9 Biden-based states that were good for the next 4 years, 8 Trump-based states that were good for the next 4 years, very even. But the bad teams are certainly lopsided. And again, that goes back into the fact that Biden won, so there's just more teams, and there can only be so many good teams, right? So this is naturally going to happen based on the results of the election. 11 bad teams for Biden and 4 for Trump. All right, so if you want to look at this as percentages, red states with winning records, 25. Red states with losing records for the last 4 years, 12.5. Blue states with losing, 34. And blue states with winning, 28. So again, a lot of this is just based on the fact that they had a higher volume of teams, and you're going to see certainly more variance when that is the case. So what's my conclusion? Just vote. All right, we weren't going to find anything, guys. Of course, the way your state aligns does not have an impact on its NFL team, but it was fun to look through and see if we could force a square peg in a round hole. Here's the deal. I realize that the kind of norm of our nation is not to talk about politics, right? Like there's just kind of this cliche phrase that we shouldn't, it's not important, it's private information. It can be very private. If you don't feel like sharing with anybody, that's totally within your rights. I I would say this. If you don't care about what I'm going to say in the next 5-ish minutes about how I view this election, you can click off. But if you're curious about me and kind of how I view this, here's what I'll say. I have a daughter, and I could probably stop there, and you could probably guess where my vote's going in a few days. But I think that as sad as it is, I have not always been someone who's recognized the privileges I've had as the person that I am. Okay? And it's taken me 20 some years to understand that and kind of knock off that shell that I've had where it's like, I don't have privilege. Oh, everybody has their own, right? Having a daughter, getting close to some women that I used to work with, like expanding my worldview a little bit has shown me that. And, listening to people who may have not have had the voice and the representation historically, listening to things from their perspective changes you. And for a long time, I didn't even listen, right? It's echo chambers, And when you grow up the way I did, which was in a very religious, very conservative household, you kind of vote a certain way, or you're kind of, you kind of figure out that you're expected to vote a certain way. And I don't necessarily, I don't view it in that way anymore. I've kind of stepped away from certain things, and I look at this election as pretty obvious in terms of person, in terms of humanity. Like if you're voting for humanity, if you're voting for the world will be a better place as a whole, for people to exist as a whole, not just people who you look like, right? People as a whole. There's a vote. There's a vote to cast, right? And I know people are going to say, well, the economy, well, taxes, well, you got to, well, I have certain things that I can't compromise on. That's fine, right? You, at the end of the day, have to answer to what you believe is the highest, most important thing. And for me, I think I look at my daughter and I think when she grows up, she's going to learn about this election in school, right? And there's an obvious choice, I think. And I get people are going to say, lesser of two evils. I don't even view it like that. I view it as for humanity, for like right and wrong, for morals. There's a wrong choice, and I can't vote for the wrong choice. All right, so that's where I am, and I'm still growing. I'm still learning, and a lot of people may look at that and say, "That's not growth. You're a sheep. You're a beta. How dare you? Oh my gosh, you've drank the Kool-Aid." The Kool-Aid's not bad, if that's what it is. I quite like the Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid makes me feel better about my time on this earth, if I'm being honest. So I'll welcome the Kool-Aid, if that's what it comes down to. So I know that this started off lighthearted and fun and kind of joking, and now we're here talking about Kool-Aid. But it is what it is, and I think it's important to talk about. And I thank you guys for listening, if you chose to listen. And regardless of who you vote for, I love you, I respect you, and I wish you the best. And it would be nice if you said the same to me. And if not, then, well, heck, you don't have to watch another Green Beans Go video for the rest of your life. All right? So take care. Good luck in your life and in your voting and in your endeavors. And we'll see you next time, I hope.